Well, welcome to this COVID conversation at Top 10 Records. This is Mike Polk, owner of Top 10 Records from 1979 to 2016-17. And I'm Lily Taylor. I've been working here for the past 3 years, from 2017 till 2020. And we're just going to have a little talk about the history of Top 10 Records. We've had this conversation many times before, but we've never recorded it. And so I want this information to be available for people who are just curious, but also maybe they're doing research about music culture in Texas. So where are we?
We're at 338 West Jefferson Boulevard, Oak Cliff, Texas.
Oak Cliff. And so we're at Bishop. We're Jefferson at Bishop, like right in the heart. So Jefferson Boulevard was a really important, prominent street for businesses in Oak Cliff, right? Back in, like the 20s or even before that?
All the way, yeah.
It started in the late 1800s with a developer named Marsalis, and he worked with Armstrong. I guess they had some kind of a fight. Marsalis ended up with this part of the land, and they wanted to develop it for a resort kind of idea. They wanted people to live here, but also visit, and that's why the park is so nice, the Cliff Park. There's different estates all around, like beautiful architecture. But it's west of Dallas. It's on the other side of the Trinity, so it's really been able to create its own identity over the years. So did you grow up nearby?
I lived at Netches and Bishop, which is north from here.
Just north of here.
Yeah.
And what decade was that?
In the 50s.
In the 50s?
Yeah, graduated high school 59.
From Sunset?
Adamson.
Adamson.
Yeah, 59.
Sometimes I listen.
Well,
From Adamson.
Yeah.
So you were like a young man growing up in Oak Cliff, running around. Like, what was that like on Jefferson?
Well, not running around, because the 4 years I went to Adamson, I worked downtown at the Palace Theater for 4 years.
Oh.
So
What were you doing there?
Usher,
Okay.
ticket taker and stuff like that.
Wow.
And many times the streetcar would be stopped running at midnight or so, and I'd have to walk across the bridge home.
Oh, Mike.
Oh, it was beautiful then. That's when I've been able to use my brain and think. Now, young people don't have that opportunity.
Time to reminisce about the day. So what were some of do you remember any of the movies that were played then?
Well, the big thing we played, Ten Commandments.
Oh.
Reserved seats. Oh, that was real. And the Palace Theater, of course, had the organ.
Oh.
Downtown. They've tore it down. The Majestic Theater's still there, but the Palace is tore down.
So they had an organ that they would play in between movies?
Yes.
Reels?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's cool. Did they serve popcorn?
Everything. Popcorn,
Really?
hot dogs, the same thing, candy. Yeah, it was fun. But I worked there 4 years.
So once that finished, did you stay here in Dallas?
Yes, I was dating a girl that her mother owned an employment agency. And she got me my first job. And of course, I knew it wouldn't last, so she set me up with my second job, which was Fairbanks Morris. And that's where the old spaghetti warehouse, I think they've closed now. But downtown in West End is where the Fairbanks Morris was.
Right.
So I started there.
Wow. And did you ever come into Top 10 Records during that time?
I met Mr. Stark. My mother worked at the courthouse at Bishop at Beckley and Zangs for justice of the peace. And Mr. Stark used to fix my mother's radio. And so when he had it repaired, I would come by and get it. That's how I first met him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you came here, before you even knew you would be at the helm of the ship for many years. That's so cool.
Yes.
And so do you remember kind of the feelings about this place? Like, was it really a hub for a lot of people to come to, or were there a lot of different record stores around, or like how did this place connect with people in the community?
Well, at that time there was Top 10, and there was Coghill Simmons record store that was at Edgefield and Davis.
Okay.
And it sold Barbra Streisand, you know, upper, you know, middle class white American music. Dub carried, or Mr. Stark carried everything that people wanted.
Okay.
He never bought anything to sell. His attitude was, you tell me what you would like and I will get it for you.
Okay.
And so it was mostly country western, comedian, you know, Red Fox, and
Okay.
all the stuff that anybody wanted. You know.
Okay.
And this was just a huge store for country western fans.
I heard a story about Dub Stark that he would have all of the 45s. And 45s are the smaller records. For those who don't know, they're also called 7 inches, and they have one song per side. And he would have them stacked across the counter, but he knew where everything was, and it was organized by label, by record label. So you'd come in and you'd say a name of an artist, and he would know that they were on Chess Records, and he would know exactly in the stack where they were. And I also heard another rumor that he would keep magazines under the counter, and if you knew to ask, he had that kind of thing to sell.
Oh, yes.
I just think that's great.
But he had all the constables and the sheriffs from the courthouse. They all come up here.
Really?
They all knew him. You know,
Okay.
He was a member of the Lions Club.
Okay, so
You
he
know.
was a really
He was-
respected business
Oh, this was a very,
entrepreneur in
very
town.
respected community business at that time.
That's very cool.
And it was busy. And of course, how and when he became a Billboard reporter, I do not know. But he reported to Billboard, and that was very, very important in those days, especially to the labels.
Right, so they were reporting how many sales they were having per artist.
And used to do that
Billboard.
verbally over the phone. Once a week they would call you
Oh my gosh.
and go over the sales. And of course they would supply him with making sure that he had all the inventory he needed. So therefore he was able to,
So just verbal, that's so interesting.
even when I took over the store, that's how I started doing Billboard.
Okay.
And then the Billboard, Nielsen bought them, and they called me and talked to me, and they said, "You're not computerized, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "We're going to temporarily not contact you anymore. We're going to work only with the stores that have computer services right now to do Billboard."
As they were shifting their
Yes.
platform digitally.
And he said, "But in the future," he said, "we will call you back because your store is highly recommended by everybody in the industry as far as reporting, and we definitely want you to be a reporter."
Wow.
So it was like maybe a year, and they contacted me and made arrangements. I had to buy the point of sale system, but they paid it back in every 3 months until the system was paid for. So they paid for my first computerized system here.
That's wild.
So,
That's wild.
and that's one reason the store is always sustained, because we were a Billboard reporter, and when new products come out, each label or has new artist or new song, they would always bring them by here to make sure we knew that their new product was
So you were
out.
part of a system that
Yes.
was built, right? So people, as musicians, they knew this place could be a resource.
Oh yeah, they drug them all by here.
Okay. Okay.
You know, so.
So let's back up a little bit. So you grew up here down the street, but you didn't always live here. There were many years where you were off in other states, right?
Yes, my job from Fairbanks Morris, my first boss was Phil Wagner from Chicago. And he hired me, and later on they were, as I say, they were downtown, and then they moved out to Stemmons Freeway. And I was working with him. One day he called me and said, "Mike, I'm going to be going. They're going to transfer me to San Francisco." So I said, "Okay." So in my mind, I said, "Uh-oh." Anyway, after that, I left Fairbanks Morris that time and went to work for the Dallas Salesmanship Club in the camp in East Texas with a counselor, I and another counselor, and 6 boys. And that was fine until I saw snakes. I said, "This ain't for me." So
You're an Oak Cliff boy.
I know. I'm on the phone. I call my ex-boss, Phil Wagner, in San Francisco. I said, "You know, if you need help, I'm available." He says, "Thank God you called." So he sent me money to pay for my trip from Dallas to San Francisco and hired me to San Francisco at Fairbanks Morris again.
Oh my gosh, so it was just timing.
Oh yeah, gifts from the man above.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long were you out in the Bay Area?
Probably 2 years.
Okay.
And at that time, it was very expensive. So I went and got a job at the Palace Theater on Market Street. His name was Long. He was the general manager of ABC Theaters as a night manager. So I worked at Fairbanks Morris during the day and night manager at the Palace Theater.
And what years were this? Like what decade?
I'm no good at names.
Okay. Do you remember like how oldish you were?
Oh, I could have been 25.
25-ish? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Young man.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Nothing fearful.
Yeah.
And then one day at Fairbanks Morris, Phil Wagner calls me in the office to introduce me to Salah Hafedin, and he was the controller of Fairbanks Morris. And he said that he wanted me to meet him because he said they're going to transfer me to Fair Lawn, New Jersey. And I explained to him that if I leave and you stay, you will not have a job. Because I was doing cleanup work for salesmen and their sales accounts and all this, just basically trying to organize the financial part of each district, and San Francisco is one of the districts.
Okay.
So he asked me, he said, we have Beloit, Wisconsin, or we have Kansas City. And I chose Beloit, Wisconsin. So before Phil Wagner left, I was transferred from San Francisco to Beloit, Wisconsin.
Wow.
So.
Okay, and then the movie theater there, you've told me some amazing stories of being able to meet all these different directors that were coming in and different tycoons and like how the theater was so grand. How many people would it fit?
The first theater, that was when I went back to San Francisco and went to work for Earl Long as an assistant manager at St. Francis Theater.
Okay.
And then the general manager of United Artists Theater heard about me and offered me a job at the El Rey Theater in San Francisco, Ocean Avenue, and it's set between City College and San Francisco College. It had 1,277 seats.
Wow.
So that's the theater that I ran there for about 3 years, and then they transferred me from there to Chicago, Illinois.
Right, okay.
And we opened Oakbrook, Cinema 150 in Oakbrook, Illinois, and then a sixplex in the Marina Towers in downtown Chicago.
Wow.
And then after that, I was sent to Puerto Rico and opened a new theater there for them.
That's crazy.
And then after that, I was sent back to San Francisco Bay Area as their divisional manager.
Okay.
And that lasted a few years.
And then that's when you decided to come back to DFW, to Dallas. And then how was it that you got reconnected with Dub Stark here at Top 10?
I had said to myself in San Francisco at the time, if I go back to Dallas, I'm going to do two things. One, I think I will buy Top 10. This is a seed planted.
Okay, you just had this idea.
Yes, and planted the seed.
It's amazing.
Yes. So when I got back, I come by to say hello, and he had the flower shop next door. He had closed the store and sold it to a guy who never opened it for retail.
Okay.
He was just taking out all the collectible pictures and stuff
Right.
from the country western years.
Right.
And so I operated the store a year and a half for Dub, and at the end of that, Mr. Stark helped me by giving me a check for $100 to go buy $100 worth of 45s. And $75 in cash. And that's how I started Top 10.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
That's such a story.
Well,
so I've been working at this place for the past 3 years as a nonprofit entity that is also just trying to keep the retail part of the shop functioning and as a resource for music lovers as well as musicians. And so I'm familiar with how just $1 can help you get to the next dollar, to the next, to the next. So, I mean, $175 is not a lot of money, even back then, to be starting up a business.
But at that time when I took over the store, my rent was $125 a month.
The rent at Top 10 Records was $125 a month?
Yes.
Wow.
And then, of course, the big distributor was Big State Distributors. And they were the largest distributors of music in the United States at the time. In fact, they were the exclusive distributor for Motown Records.
Okay.
Up until Barry Gordy sold Motown to Universal.
Okay. So kind of talking about that, like thinking about Motown and like what I know of Motown and the music I've been exposed to commercially that Motown has put out. So this was known as more of like a country western kind of thing. And when you came in, the business had shifted, right?
Well, the neighborhood started. Dallas was building downtown Dallas.
Okay, so downtown's been built all up.
Yes, and all the Hispanic people that were working in downtown, the ones with families, chose Oak Cliff to live into.
Because you could have a house and all this.
House, park, school, and
right.
no alcohol.
Right, because it was
Cliff
dry.
was dry completely.
It was dry back then.
So this was, and still is, a very, as you know, at night, this is still a neighborhood
Oh, totally.
community.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
not anywhere like Dallas at all.
No, that's what I love about it. I've lived in lots of different places, and what I really cherish about Oak Cliff is that it's been able to create its own identity. And that's the kind of thing you look when you're traveling, that's what I look for. It's like, well, this is the, one neighborhood has this kind of flavor, this neighborhood has another kind of flavor of architecture, of culture, anything, right? So
I call Oak Cliff vegetable soup. Everything's in it.
everything's in it.
And it tastes good.
So it makes it good.
Yes.
Okay, so you're shifting the genre into really what the people wanted here.
Well,
You were
Mr. Stark,
listening.
when I got the store, Mr. Stark said to me, he said, you wait on one customer at a time, Mike.
Okay.
And
That is customer service.
He said, you wait on one customer at a time, and if anybody complains, you just have to explain to them, I will be with you when I finish helping this person. So originally, the Hispanics started coming in, and a few white people would go next door and complain
What?
that I was waiting on the Mexicans.
What?
Oh yeah, that's happened. And so Mr. Stark come over and talked to me a little about it, and I just sat there and was very polite and listened. I said, yes, they're right. They're exactly what they told you is exactly what happened. But I said, do you remember why? And he looked at me and I said, because you told me to wait on one customer at a time. He never said a word after that. Because he realized what it is.
Exactly.
And he said, and the reason for that, he said, if you treat one person right, they're going to tell their friends.
Right.
And
Right.
that's all you have to do. And this, because you're not selling anything, you're just getting something that somebody wants.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we literally sell customer service here.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And then there's this music culture attached to that.
But it is completely, I've operated the store for almost 40 years, or 25 years of the 40, not like a business at all, because my customers were my boss, I didn't,
I love it.
Today with computers and everything, everybody knows what they're going to make and how much money they're going to make. And customer service that's what's wrong with, not wrong, but that's one of the problems in the society now, that we've disconnected ourselves based on dollars.
Right. The humanity of it.
It's
right?
gone. Take it out of it.
So when people come in here, there's always a genuine connection that's happening.
Oh, yeah.
And we do try to offer lots of different things. The inventory stock ebbs and flows, but we always try to keep it, a little bit of something for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking back to so you're pre-computers, you're doing all of this. Did you have multiple shifts of teams over the years who would come in and help, suggest, hey, we should bring in this kind of inventory, or hey, I can help you on this Saturday, or what did that kind of look like over the years?
I never did that because a couple people suggested that, like sales. I said, yeah, I can put everything on sale, but if there's nobody on the street, who are you going to sell it to? Give me a break. And we're in a Hispanic Mexican community, and you understand their pay periods and how they live and how they spend their money, and you adjust to your customer. I adjusted to the customer, and of course they knew that if they asked me to get something, I kept my word. And if I was unable to get it, I kept my word by telling them I cannot do this, I could not do this.
Sure.
And that was the foundation of this store. And they would tell their friends, one after one, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And the help was any kid in the neighborhood come in here didn't have anything to do. I said, what's going on? I said, sit down on the stool. I said, maybe you can help me today.
Well, okay, so I had the distinct pleasure of meeting and then working with Big Baby. He would come in weekly, and we would work together for these mixes. And he was telling me these stories. He's passed away now, unfortunately. But before that happened, we were able to reminisce a little bit about what it was like. And I remember him just standing just over there, like looking around, like, oh, I remember. Because he was like a teenager.
Oh, yes.
Right? I think this might have even been his first job.
It was.
Where he was handing change to people and packing up the bags and, learning all that stuff.
Yeah.
Just think back to my early jobs. Yeah, I don't know. That's cool. That's a little.
And Steve and Joe, who ran the store for me for 8 and 10 years, they asked me what I was going to teach them. I said, I'm not going to teach you anything. I'm going to show you how to do things. But what you will learn is how good you are. And from that, you can take care of yourself once you know how good you are.
How did you get involved with KNON, the radio station here in Dallas?
All gifts from the man above.
Yeah?
Yes. The Hispanic community was coming on, and then I had gotten a young man a job at Big State at one time. Two men at one time at Big State, and one of them had gone to Houston to work for Southwest Distributors, which was was Tejano Distributors, and the other one went to Fort Worth. The MDI was a distributor of freestyle and love songs and everything.
Okay.
And I hired Steve, and then Steve hired his friend Joe, and Steve come to me and was telling me, and I said, well, Steve, this is a business. He said, the DJs at the KNON, come in here looking for stuff, but they can't get the product. And I said, well, let me tell you how this works. The labels will not send them product unless they can see that they're sending them free samples to play on the air, and if it's generating sales. So I said, explained to them, I said, when you get something in here you think's good, send a copy of it to the DJs, and if they like it, have them call you back, and then with Tony and MDI and Adrian Conejo in Houston, tell them that this is what we want to order, and when you get the product in the store, wait till you have it in the store.
In hand. You
call the DJs back at the radio station and tell them we now have it.
Okay.
And they would start playing it.
And everyone knew to come in and get it.
The phone would ring at KNON. Where can you get this? Where can you get this?
So you developed another system to get that information out to the public.
One helping another.
Right.
See.
I love that.
And then all of a sudden, the DJs at KNON, they kept thousands and thousands of 12-inch records from the labels, any independent label, any label, because they knew. We sold more. Big State told me that we had sold more 12-inch records out of this store than they had ever seen in any store.
Really?
You had to wait on Friday and Saturday night to get into the store.
Oh my gosh.
You had to stand outside.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So as we shifted into a nonprofit, we started hosting really regular events in here. And it was a way to get people into the store. We had repainted, we'd done this rebranding, because literally it was a relaunch into a different set of circumstances.
Yeah, the clock goes forward.
The clock moves forward. We can't control that. That's what's happening. So we had a lot of live concerts in here, all different people touring through. We had people from Europe come through. We had different people from California, from the East, converging through here because Dallas is a really centrally located city. And I'm just thinking back of like what you've seen here over the past 3 years, because you've come to a lot of these concerts and been a part of those events. Were you hosting shows, like a live event things at the store before it was a nonprofit?
We held no live shows, and the main reason for that was that this was a neutral, wonderful environment for everybody, and I didn't want to have a show here where somebody from outside might come in and be jealous of what we were doing.
I see.
And cause some kind of disturbance.
Right.
So we just...
You focused on it as as a retail shop.
As a retail shop
Right.
only, yeah.
But you would do like autograph events, right? Because there's a lot of pictures of famous people
We
who've
would,
come through.
yes, we would do the autographs when it was a benefit for KNON, which was a nonprofit radio station.
Okay.
And when they held the event and the autographs, they would bring the artist in to do a show at State Fair or at one of the nightclubs. And before that, a couple of nights before that, they would bring them by here for a pre-autograph party to meet the young people who don't go to the clubs and are not old enough to go. And they would come in and sign autographs and all that. And that's the only time we had insight, is when it involved KNON, the nonprofit, to help them.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as someone who's trying to recontextualize a lot of these things and put them into practice as the nonprofit, I'm just seeing that this place, Top 10 Records, has always been this resource to music lovers to come in and connect to the music that they love, but also to the artists and to the DJs. Like, there was like an ecosystem happening. There were lots of different roles within the music industry that people were playing, and
Yeah.
Top 10 Records just naturally like fit in to a lot of this system.
Yes, and we, there was 2 or 3 other stores that opened and tried to do the same thing, but they would charge the artist to put up a poster, or they would charge for an autograph party, and they would do all this. And I said to Steve, we're in here to get music for the customers we want, and that's all we do, and we're not going to charge an artist. And so when Top 10 became the nonprofit, before that, every poster that had ever been put up in here in the 25 years stayed on the wall.
Wow.
I would not take one down. And people would come in, the artist itself or friends would, look at that, that's the first CD I bought, and the poster's still here.
Oh my gosh.
I said, well, it's still here because you bought that CD.
Right. So part of the relaunch was to begin, unfortunately a lot of special merch was, this and that happened throughout the transition. But the idea for us now is to have the Top 10 Records Texas Music Archive. And it's growing. It's a small collection at this point of vinyl, CDs, cassette tapes, VHS, DVDs, thumb drives of information. But they're set albums that are put out, and people can come to the store and listen, or they can check out those items on loan as part of the library system. So these interviews are actually going to be part of the Top 10 Records Texas Music Archive, and I'm hoping to be collecting more stories of people from Oak Cliff, but also from musicians, from the mouths of the musicians themselves. So this is part of that project.
Well, you said about the musicians, already the ones that have come here for the first time to do their music, and how thrilled one gentleman was, the fact that when he used to come here and was young, the fact he was actually able to come in here and play.
Right, to come play the show, yeah.
And so that was the foundation, and among the Hispanics, or the Hispanics, freestyle and rap, but mostly freestyle. All the artists will tell you that without this store, they would not have had the career they had.
Wow.
And KNON, of course.
Right.
And you're building that too. There's a few people who can get that. Like I say, that gentleman that was here when he was a teenager, now back in here playing.
Man, those stories are the coolest. Like when people come in and they're like, I used to come in when I was 10, and this is my 10-year-old grandson, and I've just brought him in to see the store. Like that, it just blows my mind. Another thing that happened, so this Top 10 Records moved to this location in 1956. Before that, it was a Philco repair shop, and they had appliances like record players, like refrigerators, washing machines. So we had a band come in and set up, the drummer setting up their drums, and they informed me that they are the grandson of the man who ran the Philco shop here. And I was like, is your grandfather still alive? He said, no, unfortunately not. But just the fact that this full circle community thing was happening, where he was playing live music in the space that was once his family business. It was just one of those moments where you can't make that up.
Some people miss it, but it really, people don't understand that we take nothing from each other. That each individual has an unlimited supply of things they want or need in their life. If they will do it from the center of themselves and for the benefit of other people. It will keep the circle going. See, it's all it's about.
It's how we're connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're all connected.
And honoring each person
Yes.
in that moment that you're in. You've taught me a lot, Mike, about staying very present and to be very grateful. It's not, the gratitude just comes. It's just about being mindful and being very present. And then things start to fall into place in a totally different way.
My whole cycle has just been a gift.
Yeah.
See,
It's a great story. It really is.
you know, but I'm only one person. Everybody has that opportunity.
Sure.
But how come we have greed and jealousy and envy? I don't understand that.
Well,
It goes back to one time when my mother told me, don't worry about what you look like. Just keep yourself neat and clean. And she said, you know why? I said, why? Because she said, you don't have to look at yourself. That's the other person's problem. So, you know.
yeah, that's true. Okay. Well, we can wrap it up. I just wanted to make sure that we were capturing.
Yeah, we didn't mention about the artists that come in here, you know, like Emmylou Harris and all those.
Yeah, well,
Nikki Gilly.
because it was Billboard,
Yes.
right? They would send artists
Oh, they'd bring them all by here.
through town to come say hi,
Oh,
and
yeah.
sign a photo, and do that kind of
You
thing.
know, and I told you know they took me on trips because that was Billboard, but that part they don't want to know about anymore because that was then. This now they don't do that anymore.
The music business has changed.
Yeah, and well, and the poor artists they didn't know they were paying for all this.
It came from their contracts.
Oh, sure it did.
Right,
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. The labels didn't lose anything.
Yeah.
That wasn't anything new.
That's crazy.
That was funny.
Should we touch on the story of J.D. Tippett?
Oh, we could, yeah.
So, in 1963, this was a ticket concert outlet for the Dick Clark Showcase that was supposed to happen on November 22nd when
It's a state fair.
the president was supposed to come visit Dallas and Dick Clark was going to have this showcase. And side note, on the poster it says that there's like a special pick local artist that will be announced later. And I am just dying to find out who that artist was because the concert was canceled. It did
Yeah.
not happen because John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And what I found out from Steve Bonner, who worked down the street at the hardware store with his father, that he had bought tickets. He purchased tickets at Top 10 Records for the same concert. And after the assassination, he came back to get reimbursed for the concert ticket because it was canceled. And Dub Stark told him that Oswald had been in to purchase those tickets.
Yes.
I've never heard that story before.
Yeah, he bought 2 tickets.
He bought 2 tickets to that concert, which is so strange. So on that very day, he was down at the book depository building, and people saw him there eating a candy bar. And something happened. Officer J.D. Tippett was not with his partner because his partner was secured on security detail downtown. But Officer Tippett was somehow over here in Oak Cliff, and he drove his squad car over here. He knew there was a telephone. He came into the store, he made a telephone, it rang 7 or 8 times, nobody picked up, and he left very frustrated. And when he left, he drove up Jefferson and went down to 10th and Patton, and that's where he saw Oswald. We don't know why, but he got out of his car, and that's when Oswald shot and killed him. So there's witnesses to that.
Yes.
And then Dub was actually interviewed, wasn't he?
Correct.
For I don't know if it was the JFK Commission, but there was some kind of formal report that he was interviewed
They
for.
just didn't put much emphasis in that because there was no way to know who he had called.
Right, we don't know who he called because nobody picked up, right? And there's no like records at that point. But it's the same telephone. It's still on the edge of the counter. And tourists from all over the world come in here. They know about Top 10 Records and they come in to see the phone and try to piece together what happened that day and see how far away things are from one another. And this is the only place, other than the actual, unfortunately, the death site, this is the only place that's a building that honors J.D. Tippett every November for being a part of that big story and
Mhm.
trying to apprehend Oswald.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. And then the other part of that story is that Oswald ran back this direction and ducked into the Texas Theater across the street. And we have a connection with the Texas Theater here at Top 10 Records, part of the nonprofit. There are different staff members who are involved at the theater as well as over here.